this is the Folksy Friend, and on this channel I talk about stories, in particular, folk tales, beliefs, and mythologies. On Tuesdays, we talk Tolkien, and today's Tuesday, so here we go. Today we are talking about the Battle of the Powers. At this point in history, Tolkien's elves have awoken beside Cuivianen, which is a bay in the inland sea of Melkor. After teaching themselves to speak and exploring their little corner of the world, they were found by Melkor, who sent spirits to haunt and abduct them. Years later, the Valar finally learned of their existence because of Orome, who more or less stumbled upon them by accident. Now, the Valar have finally decided to take action to remove Melkor from Middle-earth so that he is unable to continue to harm the elves. The war began in the northwest, where Melkor had already placed his armory and fortress of Angband in preparation for the Valar's attack. He did this years and years ago. The fortress was overcome quickly, and Melkor's forces fell back to his stronghold of Autumno. As the Valar crossed the world in pursuit, they put a guard over Cuivianen, protecting the elves from any harm during this battle. Because of this, the Quendi knew nothing of the great battle of the powers, save that the earth shook and groaned beneath them, and the waters were moved, and in the north there were lights as of mighty fires. The siege of Autumno was long and fierce, and it changed the very geography of Middle-earth. I will go over a full geographical breakdown later in the video. After years of onslaught at the gates of Autumno, the gates were broken, and the top of the underground fortress was thrown off, much like yanking the top off a trapdoor spider's den. And, like a little spider, Melkor immediately ran inward. He hid in the deepest, darkest pits of Autumno, but Tulkas was not about to let him get away. Tulkas dove in after him and wrestled Melkor out, binding him in a special chain that Aule had created to control him. The Valar were successful. They led Melkor back to Valinor and threw him onto his face in the Ring of Doom. Remember, the Ring of Doom is their kind of council space, not like Mount Doom. Different. Manwë stood before him, and Melkor asked for mercy, but he was denied. He was cast into prison in the halls of Mandos, somewhere no one could escape. He was sentenced for 3 ages, and at that time, the Valar would listen to his case again. Melkor never forgot that the War of the Powers was waged to protect the elves. He blamed them for losing control of Middle-earth. However, despite the destruction of his stronghold and the fact that Melkor was captured, not all was lost. The pits of Autumno were so vast that even with the roof pulled off, many evil things still managed to hide in the deep pits and caverns. So some of Melkor's supporters hid deep in Autumno, some fled into the dark places of Middle-earth, but they all waited for him to return. Now let's take a look at how the Battle of the Powers changed the landscape of Middle-earth. It's important to have an idea of the landscape because the land stays in more or less the same shape throughout the First Age of Middle-earth, right up until the end, actually, of the First Age in the sinking of Beleriand. And the events of the Quenta Silmarillion, which is the vast majority of the Silmarillion, take place in and around the northwest. So we'll take a look in particular at how that has changed. I will be using the Atlas of Middle-earth by Karen Wynne Fonstaff to help us better visualize the geography. Just so you know, if you watched my previous video on the awakening of the elves, I used a map to show where Cuivianen was, where the bay is, and unfortunately I used the wrong map. I used the map that is actually what the world looks like after the Battle of the Powers. So just bear in mind, this video is correct. Belegir, the sea between Aman and Middle-earth, grew. A gulf formed to the south and was called the Great Gulf. More to the north was the Bay of Valar, and in the furthest north was the Helcaraxe, the only place where Aman was connected to Middle-earth. This was the grinding ice, a section of ocean that was frozen by Melkor's violent frosts in the north. In the northern parts of Middle-earth, new highlands were formed, Darthonian and Hithlum, which were surrounded by Ered Lomin, the Echoing Mountains, and Eredwethrin, the Mountains of Shadow. From these highlands, waters flowed down to form the river Sirion, which emptied out into the Bay of Balor. And these northern highlands were desolate after the Battle of the Powers. So at this point, the battle is won. Melkor is in prison. The elves are still beside Cuavianen. They have not moved, and it is now kind of up to the Valar to decide what to do with them. So I hope you will join me in my next video when I will go over the Great Journey. Thank you for spending some time with me as I talked about Tolkien today. If you enjoyed this video, please leave me a like, let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you soon.